So hi, Kyle. Thanks for joining us today. And it's a pleasure to have you on the ITOM Spotlight show. So before we get started, before we get into the technical details you have to share with us, could you please introduce yourself, give us an insight into your roles and responsibilities as somebody in the ITOM domain?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Kiel Hawkins. I've been in the IT industry for quite a long time, probably about 20 years or so, pretty much since my first job doing technical support for a telecom company that doesn't exist any longer. So in my role as the MIS director, I kind of help lead our IT org part of our organization. I have kind of a diverse set of responsibilities, mostly because of our relatively small size. So rather than just doing like project management and a lot of leadership sorts of things, people management that happens at the director level, I do a lot of visioning work, research when it comes to technology for our organization, future planning, those sorts of things, trying to set kind of the long-term goals for where we're going with technology, trying to get an idea of where our organization wants to be. And then beyond that, a lot of the day-to-day work, I end up, architecting systems and configuring things and working on projects and all sorts of other pieces like that. So it's really interesting, not just being at the top looking down at how everything is going, but then being in the trenches with my people and working through those solutions with them.
Hill, that sounds like a lot of work. So we are interested in a very particular question, Carl. Could you give us an unfiltered version of a day in the life of Kyle, the IT guy at managing so many different things?
Sure. The beginning of the day starts with coffee typically, and then after that, I mean, it's checking email, it's catching up on everything, making sure I didn't miss anything overnight. Looking at my to-do list, make it, I live by the to-do list, and then from there, I am checking in on projects, making sure that things are going well with projects, and catching up with my people. Obviously, I've got a calendar, I've got meetings, I've got sorts of things like that. And then depending on the day, there's training that comes in that I try to keep myself abreast of systems and technology that we're dealing with. So a lot of times I'm taking the same kinds of training that I expect my systems administrators to take, for example. And then it just really depends on the day. There's a lot of days where it's super busy and I have meetings all day long with a whole bunch of people, or I'm solving problems with my team or working on things. And there's times where it's not so busy and I can get a breather and I'll get an opportunity to do some research into a new technology or something. But that's a lot of what it looks like. And like I said, it's hard to pin down like specific parts of the day because it kind of varies from day to day so much.
So from you giving us an unfiltered take, obviously, into a day in your life as an MIS director, I can understand that you are very organized. You have very clear set goals, for example, your to-do list. So on a broader spectrum, could you give me a look into what is your to-do list or what is your organization's to-do list in the technology front? Where do you want to be?
So where we want to be is we are definitely making a move to the office anywhere kind of model. I think that it's been moving like that for a long time in our organization. I think the whole COVID thing just accelerated some things. I think in some ways it proved that it was a viable model for us. But when I came to the organization a few years ago, we were definitely not in that place. I came in right in the middle of the whole COVID thing. in 2021, and we were, we had a single data center. We had all of our 8 or 9 locations all tunneled back to that data center, and people were all using the VPN, and a lot of organizations did that. That's how they were doing it. And the last few years, well, we've shifted to moving some things more to the cloud. We are trying to get rid of our VPN currently. We don't want to have users be using the VPN. I think for them it's clunky, and there's some other technologies out there that can help facilitate that. But with us moving to the cloud, a lot of it's not even necessary. And the idea for us, because we're not just in healthcare and taking care of kids like in our location, but we're actually trying to be out in the communities and keep the children they're having these problems in their homes with their parents, treating the whole family rather than just treating the kid themselves. That means that I've got staff that are out in the community all day long. They've got a hotspot on their phone, and they're connecting to services that way. And so having them tunnel all the way back to our organization every single time, that's not always feasible based on connectivity in an area. And so trying to find some ways where they can do more on their laptops, more with what they have, and connecting to places that like Microsoft's cloud, for example, which likely has better connectivity anywhere that they are than our site in the middle of North Carolina. So just kind of thinking through, like, how can we eliminate barriers, technological barriers for our staff, and try to make our IT infrastructure as seamless and invisible as possible, so they're spending less time dealing with it and more time dealing with and helping our clients.
Okay, so from what I can understand is that as an organization, you're trying to make it seamless, more intuitive, and more simple for your end users to use your network, correct? So you're focusing on helping them to work from anywhere, basically. So remote work is one thing, and you're also focusing on the cloud migration, if I'm right. So, and then you also making sure that you do not put in so much security that users find it difficult to actually access your IT. So remote work, cloud, and security, well, it all looks like a very challenging task to take upon. So could you give us, like, what are the challenges that you face when you take such big steps in technology to make it simpler for the users to use your IT?
There's a couple things. One is just adoption rates. People are resistant to change just in general. And so making some of those bigger changes, it definitely comes with its own problems. Thankfully, our staff has been fantastic, and we definitely try our best to not only give them like plenty of lead time and understand like what's happening, but not just the what, but the why. Why are we doing this? We're not just randomly changing things on you because we're doing this in order to make XYZ easier for you, or we're going to make it more secure. But in doing that, we're going to try to make it easier. And at the end of the day, that's usually our goal is if there's any way that we can do anything, and also make it less steps for our staff, we're going to probably choose that option versus the same thing or a slightly more secure option, but it's significantly more complicated, for example. The other thing, though, with the user adoption rates, and I think that everywhere you are, that's an issue. It's just getting users to start doing the things you're and make the changes that you need them to do, is just finding infrastructure and solutions that fit together well. Because you can solve problems 1,000 different ways, but we're looking for solutions that are seamless, and we're looking for solutions that are integrated with one another, systems that talk to each other, that like I said, less steps. And that definitely has some challenges with I pick system A that's a best-in-class leader, but it doesn't talk to all of the other systems that I have. And so it might be the best, but it's not the best for us because we would prefer something that is seamless and integrated. That's brought a lot of challenges to us as well over the last couple of years.
It definitely makes sense because your IT, as I can understand, it's being distributed more, and I think that's a lot of our users can relate to it because a lot of organizations are moving towards it. So you told me a couple of challenges to make systems talk with each other, to find the right integrations that work with it. And I think these are some strategies that you're using to overcome these challenges. So could you give us a few specific strategies that have helped you to, overcome these challenges and that have helped you to make IT a lot more manageable and a lot more visible to you?
Sure. I think for one of the things that we did was trying to right size the solutions that we have. There is a view I think some people have of either I'm going to go budget and go as cheap as I can on something, or I'm going to buy the Cadillac. I'm going to spend the most amount of money on whatever it is, expecting that because I spend a bunch of money, it's going to be the best and the right thing for me. And so we've spent a lot of time really narrowing down what it is that we actually need, what do we want, what is going to work best, what are our must-haves, the kind of things that you would go through when you're setting up like a scope of work and stuff like that. And then really digging into the variety of options that we have to find what closely matches that. And then trying to figure out where are we going, because just because I'm solving a problem or I need a solution now, I need to know what does it look like in 2 years? Where do I want to be? And there are times where, hey, I might buy that Cadillac because that Cadillac is going to be what I need 24 months from now. I just don't need it now. And so that's a big piece as well. If you know kind of where you want to be and what your needs are now, you can really kind of build a path, and you don't find yourself solving a problem twice. And that I've been guilty of in the past.
I think that's a very sound financial advice because a lot of IT teams, when it comes to finding the right project priority and then spending accordingly, is something a lot of us are finding a little bit difficult because, well, the economy isn't doing that great. We're not very certain as to how the future is going to be. So in these cases, how is that, can you give us a tip as to how you find the right project and you make the right investments that will help you stick to your roadmap and will also keep your budget in a very manageable level?
Yeah, I think for us, one thing that we've done is we've tried to minimize the number of vendors that we're working with. For example, a few years ago, when I first came on, we're looking at some of this roadmap and some of our goals, and I had a few different call them problems come up where our compliance department is asking for some kind of compliance software, and we're looking at changing a new phone system away from an old PBX, an on-site PBX, to like a VoIP or something like that, or cloud-based. And so we had all these projects, and just sitting down with some of the whole landscape that we have, and said, is there a way that we can solve this problem with one thing or a fewer number of things? Because I could easily just look at these requests and these problems as a silo and say, okay, well, I'm going to solve this problem with this and this problem with that and this. And I know there's a lot of IT that does that. You kind of, we'll call it seeing the forest through the trees, as they say, where you're kind of just looking at what's right in front of you and not seeing the bigger picture of it. And so what we ended up doing is saying, you know what, we're already heavily invested in Microsoft 365. Microsoft has a way that we could solve all of these problems in kind of one go. And it may not be the 100% perfect solution for each of these individual problems, but if we add it up together into one kind of thing, we can make a significant investment in, say, Microsoft E5, and it solves our compliance problem because we get access to Purview as part of that license. We get part of that is we're using Teams as a full phone system now because we don't need, we don't have a call center. We don't need a phone system that is as robust. We just need, phone numbers and an automated, just some of the basic things for a business phone system, and that it works fantastic for us now. But because we found, we looked at everything, we found one solution that meets all those needs now. I'm not paying nearly as much as I would have solving them individually, and I get the added benefit of they all talk to each other, everything's integrated into one platform. And now with some of the changes Microsoft's making for other things like Copilot, now there's a bunch of new interesting things that come from that. But yeah, that's a lot of it is just don't take those problems as themselves, but look at kind of your greater kind of landscape and where you want to be, and just ask yourself, is there a way that I can solve these issues or these requests in one go?
So I think that's a very sound advice, because you essentially told us to consolidate the different tools as per your requirement. And I'm sure that will obviously have a lot of cost benefits for people who are burning cash with licensing fees and things like that. So I think that would help us really streamline and structure how we're approaching IT spending. But with that being said, coming back to correlating it with the roadmap, I have a trick question for you. So you told me how to approach a predefined roadmap. So I want project A, which is a priority. So I'm spending for it and I'm keeping the cost in a manageable level. Great. Now, what if I have a technological disruption like AI coming in, the chatbots coming in and changing the whole game? So how do you approach those scenarios when you have a disruption midway?
Yeah, so we're dealing with it right now, right? And actually, a lot of companies are dealing with it right now. I think for us, I personally have been paying. I'm interested in this stuff. It's not just my job; it's kind of my hobby too. I enjoy what I do, so I kind of keep abreast of some of these advancements because it's interesting to me. I would say, for one, that's a big piece, is know what's going on in the industry. So you can see some of this stuff coming before it lands right in your lap. But for us, when for example, I just mentioned a Microsoft Copilot becoming available, which is a combination of machine learning and generative AI. But at the end of the day, it's the fact that you get something like ChatGPT that's trained on your own data, which is really kind of the dream. You get the AI that knows your stuff rather than just being this general thing. We've started having a plan the moment it was announced. So we've had plenty of time to say, okay, you know what, our fiscal year is coming up. I'm gonna budget for licensing for this. Whether we use it or not, we're gonna test it out. But I'm gonna plan now that we're just gonna do it so that we have that money set aside. I think a big thing with it though is not necessarily like a roadmap, like no specific projects or things, but know your end goals. Like, where do I want to be? Like for us, it's I want to have that office anywhere in 24 months. I want to have, single sign-on for everything and two-factor and all this stuff. I want our people to be able to get to all their tools. Doesn't matter what network they're on or where they are, they can just get to it, and they don't need to connect to VPN, stuff like that. Obviously, that's not a roadmap. That's not a set of projects or anything. That's just some really general like vision and goals. And I think that if you have that along with your roadmap, then you can say, hey, this new technology comes up. It's going to help me get to those goals that I have. And is there a project in this roadmap that I can either bump because maybe it's not as important, or I can incorporate another project together, and rather than do this one thing, maybe we do two things as one project because they're interconnected. I think for us, we've had a lot of flexibility, and I think that kind of big vision for our department, it's what's really made the change since I came on board. Because in the past, they didn't have any of that. It was I'm going to work the tickets and I'm going to do the things on the network to keep things maintained, but I don't have any goals and I'm not going anywhere. And so stuff just kind of stagnates. And when things like this come up, it's a lot more disruptive than just shuffling things around so you still get to your goals in a year or whatever it is.
That makes sense. So I like your approach of facing things proactively rather than to wait and see how it pans out and will I implement it or will I not implement it. So I like your idea of facing it upfront, being robust, if I'm right, and being ready for a technological change. So that brings me to the question of AIOps and observability. I think that's something that's gaining a lot of traction now, especially with AI being more technologically rapidly advancing. So, what's your take on that? How do you think AI ops and observability will impact the ITOM domain?
Well, for us anyway, I think it's going to be fantastic, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I've got a limited number of people. I think hiring a bunch of new people for us is not really feasible, and whether or not AI is a thing, that's just not feasible. But if I can leverage the people that I have right now a little bit more and give them a little bit more, we call the force multiplier. Then that's the way to go. Making my tools smarter so that my people are not having to spend as much time in them trying to figure out what's going on. Having tools that notice trends and are able to automatically like run a playbook and do something about that, even though I don't necessarily want the AI to just do whatever it wants with no oversight. The fact that it can run, it can identify issues and it can suggest solutions to those issues, and with the consent of somebody on my team, potentially address it. That's a big time savings for my people, and I can put them to better use somewhere else, getting additional training. So now they have time to do the training. I know there are some IT people, it's like, I don't have time to do, 6 hours of training a month or whatever it is. And so sometimes there's a skills gap that builds over time. And we definitely focused a lot on training and education for my people, and making sure that we stay on top of industry trends, so that they're not feeling like they're drowning when something new comes up. But I think that's like I said, that's a big thing, is just being able to have something that's a little bit more intelligent than me, noticing trends over a really large data set that just, it's not something a person can really do as easily.
That's definitely true. So your take on AI is you like how it gives you the context of things rather than for you to sit and do it hands-on, check every anomaly, identify patterns. So you take it in an approach of strategically using AI to manage your IT operations, which I think is great. So that brings me to the question. Till now, we've been seeing a lot of new trends, a lot of changes. We're seeing automations, we're seeing advanced workflows. In your 20 years of experience in this domain, what do you think is the most significant technological shift that you're seeing is happening?
Honestly, I think a lot of it is just stuff that's happening right now. And to be fair, I know the AI stuff, it looks like it's new, but honestly, machine learning, these sorts of things, it's been happening for years now. And people, we've been putting machine learning models into all sorts of stuff before people knew about ChatGPT or whatever. because it's funny, a lot of the technological changes over the last handful of years, it's just been new ways to do old things, like server virtualization. We were doing server virtualization with mainframes and things like that. I mean, it's just like I said, it's the same concept of but new ways of doing it, better ways of doing it. I think the machine learning thing is something that we've had automation, we have scripting and things like that for a long time, but having something that's able to recognize patterns, for example, and make decisions that are a lot more complex than just a yes or no, if then in a script is really, I think, for me, exciting. Like I said, I still wouldn't trust some of it to do it on its own, but yeah, it's very funny though how everything over the last 20, 30 years, it's just there's an innovation and then something changes and then we make some new updates and we go back to the earlier concept in a better way, and I'm sure that we'll come back around to something else sooner or later.
Oh, I would have to agree with you on that. So now comes a tricky question, if I might. We've been talking about how technology is evolving. We've been talking about AI, how to tackle it, how to incorporate it into your roadmap. So I'm curious about how you're doing this specifically in your domain. So healthcare. So what do you think is the challenges that IT engineers should be prepared for? And to add on to that, what do you think is a very specific strategy that, or an insight into a specific strategy that they should incorporate in the healthcare domain?
With the healthcare domain, HIPAA regulations and law, that is the at least in the US anyway, and I'm sure that there are similar cybersecurity compliance requirements in other countries. But for us, that is kind of the top priority to anything that we're doing, is the cybersecurity piece of things. How do we keep it confidential and just secure, because with HIPAA law, I have something called personal healthcare information and personally identifiable information. It's information about the specific individual whose data it is, our clients, for example, the children that we work with. So I have to be very careful with how am I configuring things? How does encryption work? Is it encrypted? And if it's not, and there's no way to encrypt it, that's not an option for us. We need to find something that is. When working with vendors, we have to consider, is this vendor going to sign what's called a BAA or business associates agreement, that they agree to treat our data the same way we would treat it. And that really limits a lot of our options and makes it so that if we're not keeping this on our forefront of our mind, if something happens and that data is released, we get fined quite a bit. I mean, potentially millions of dollars. So we really go heavy on that. But you can see though, because of that cybersecurity piece, it really colors any decisions we make and what we're doing. On the plus side, though, because we're try to be very security conscious, I think I feel better than a lot of other people out there about that, and our employees are way more knowledgeable about a lot of the cybersecurity stuff because of the training we put them through. Our compliance people aren't breathing down my neck; they're usually pretty happy about things, and because of this, I feel our IT department has garnered a lot of goodwill in the organization. And I think when it comes down to it, whenever we say we need something or we think we should do something, we pretty much get it green lit because of that goodwill. They aren't sitting here going, well, do you really need this, or do you really need to spend this money? Because we are only bringing things to them we feel we need to do, and they've been successful many times in the past.
So that's very interesting actually. So being an IT department, being this person who leads an IT department that has gained goodwill in a healthcare organization by being compliant, by being proactive, and being security conscious. I'll have to ask you this. How does your tools play a part in this? And do you have tips or tricks that we can understand when our listeners want to choose a similar tool that can help them be compliant? So it's something like compliance management, or in the security front, like firewall analyzers and tools like that. How do you choose those tools, and what are your checklist when getting these tools?
Yeah, I think a checklist for getting these tools is one, get the opinion of people you trust, for one. That's something we did. We have some partners and that we've asked about, some vendors that we've worked with for a long time that we trust, that they've steered us in the right direction for some things. I think the other thing is, and I mentioned earlier, is know what you need. There's a lot of people who they don't know what they need from a security perspective, or and that goes for anything, not just security. And so it's very easy to make the wrong decisions because you don't know what you need, and then know what you have already. There's a lot of times where in our organization we've been looking for a tool, or people have asked us for things and we already have access to things. And then for us, for security, but tools in general, I mean, the tools are what allow us to do the things we do. I think finding something that's going to give you easily accessible information to make decisions, things that are integrated. If you can find tools that talk to other tools that's definitely good, because it's just going to make it that much easier to make a decision on things. There was a point where we had multiple tools, but they were kind of on their own. And so I'm the one having to bridge that knowledge gap between the tools and make decisions. And since we've moved to some tools that are more integrated with one another, I don't have to spend as much time thinking about it. I can react faster, which in cybersecurity especially is a big thing. The faster you can find an issue and investigate it, and discover the root cause, and then remediate it, I mean, you're going to be safer. If you don't know about it, for, I think the average is like 240 days or there's some crazy number, like most of a year, that people don't know they've been hacked, that it just, so anything that's going to speed up my decision-making processes and make them more accurate is kind of the way to go. But the tools are what make or break. So the other thing I'll say is, don't cheap out on your tools, if that makes sense. Don't just buy the cheapest thing you found because of budget. I understand budgets exist for a reason. But if that cheap thing doesn't meet your needs and it's not going to solve your problems, you will eventually spend more money later trying to fix those things. It's kind of like buying the cheapest, $500 car you can find, but you spend $10,000 repairing it every other week, rather than just buying a $10,000 car or whatever. So just buy what you need, to meet your needs, is one of the best things I can say about that.
Well, that's a pretty practical checklist to be, to know what you need, to research about it, to get it, and to make sure it integrates with your existing infrastructure or tools, and to not be
Absolutely.
a little cheap with them. Cool. Now that brings me to the question: how do you find our ManageEngine tools? Because you've been using it for quite some time now, and you have a very critical checklist. So, how does these tools help you, and how's it been? How's the experience been?
Yeah, so I've been using ManageEngine tools for 10 plus years probably. We started out with Endpoint Central, and back when it was Desktop Central, and I found that because back when I was working at a school, we had probably 200 employees. We were managing quite a few laptops, but our IT team was doing that all manually. And this was back at a time when, 10 years ago, there was plenty of solutions out there, but they were doing everything manually. There was no really visibility into what was going on across the endpoint landscape as a whole. Installing software was manual. They weren't even using like SCCM or anything like that. And what we started doing is we first started looking at SCCM from Microsoft. And for us, though, with the size of the organization and just the makeup of it, what we found was not only was it really expensive, but it just was too much. It's like I could see how it'd be great if you had 10 times the amount of devices, but for what we were working with, it was more work to set it up and configure it and get it and train everybody on how to use it than it was worth. And so I started looking around at online for some options, and I ran across a handful of them, and ManageEngine was one of them, the Desktop Central, and we tried a few to kind of see how we liked. There was a couple cloud options, there were some on-premise options. We liked the idea of on-premise. That's kind of how we were doing it back then, and had direct access to the servers. And honestly, our 30-day trial was fantastic. And we ended up turning our test server into the live server because it was just so easy to set up and get going that it was like, we're basically production. Let's just, finish configuring this and get it going. And part of it for us as a school and a nonprofit is pricing, and Desktop Central was really reasonably priced. I felt like I was getting what I was paying for or more than what I was paying for. So I didn't feel like, I felt like the value was really there, but it didn't feel like the budget or the value product. It felt like we were getting an enterprise solution that solved our problems and then some, and there were plenty of options and add-ons that it could really grow into a solution. And that was something else that we looked for that we had a hard time finding with some others is, I might be here now, but I want to be up here later, but I don't want to pay up here prices right now. And that was something we also with ManageEngine that was great, was because of the tiering and the available options that you had in the system. We really could tailor our solution to where we are now and grow into something more. And it's been great. As I've been using it for 10 years, and we even went so far now with the new organization that I'm in, is we were contracted with an MSP, and they were giving us a bunch of software. They weren't even really doing anything for us, but they were charging us, a significant amount of money for all of the software that we were using. And when I came on board, what I found is that it was really just software. The MSP really wasn't doing a whole lot for us, and we were managing it all anyway. So I started to look and say, okay, well, I've been using Desktop Central for a long time, and I like it a lot. In fact, I made a comment during my interview here because they were saying, hey, there's some problems that we have. And I went back after the fact and said, hey, I've been using this for like years. I sent it to the CIO that I interviewed with, and it's probably part of the reason I got the job. So thank you, ManageEngine. Because I said, hey, you're having this problem you mentioned in the interview. This is what I've been using, and it's been fantastic for us. And we ended up buying it after I got the job. And we started finding that, Service Desk Plus and a bunch of other ManageEngine products, well, they all talk to each other. They all integrate. So for us, it's been great getting a couple different solutions that have a really great value, a lot of functionality, and they integrate. So it kind of meets all the different things I've been talking about.
That's fantastic to hear, and congratulations on using ManageEngine for the job. You are officially one of our evangelists, if I may. So that's a really good insight, Kyle. It's been an interesting session so far. You've given us a lot of tips and tricks to how to handle IT budgets, how to prioritize projects, how to be proactive with technology, how to be robust. So now comes the rapid fire round, where I'm not going to give you any chance to think. It's going to be right top of your mind of Kyle, the MIS director. So are you ready for it? Can we start?
All right, let's go.
Okay, so your first question is, how would you describe IT operations management in one word?
Complicated.
I should agree with that. If you weren't in IT, if you weren't an MIS director, who would you have been now? What would you been doing?
Honestly, I don't know. I've done this. I've done technology since I was a kid, and so I don't know. Honestly, it's a family tradition. My dad was worked for Telcom as a electrical engineer, working on old like POTS phone systems. And my brother is an MIS director with another organization, and my younger brother, he is a systems administrator working for a television provider. So it's kind of a family tradition. And not that there was any expectation, but we were all interested, and this is how it ended up.
That sounds nice. So now, Windows or Linux?
Windows, but I love Linux.
Okay, so cloud or on-premise?
Right now, I'm kind of hybrid. Cloud's just someone else's computers, right? So,
yeah, we are going to say hybrid for that question. So,
yeah.
Now, what's the most unusual IT problem you've ever had to solve?
You know what? The weirdest thing I ever had to solve was working for the government and the courthouse, specifically in California. We had two buildings, and they were connected by a point-to-point Wi-Fi bridge, a 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi bridge from Cisco, and it cut out one day, and our admin building lost connectivity. So I spent almost an entire weekend troubleshooting it, and I pulled off. We had a couple of these point-to-points, so I pulled them off and I tested them, and I even went so far as turned it into an access point, because you can do that with the Cisco's, and I could connect my phone to it and browse, and so I could not figure out why they would not connect, why they wouldn't talk to each other. Cisco support couldn't help me. They couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. I went up on our roof and opened up the control box for the Cisco Wi-Fi bridge. It's kind of two parts. There's a waterproof control box, and there's an antenna that connects into it via Ethernet. And when I opened it up, probably this much water poured out of it, and you could see that it had corroded part of the PCB, but only part of the PCB connected to. So these had two 5 gigahertz antennas in them, and only one of the 5 gigahertz antennas was corroded, and it was the 5 gigahertz antenna that helped create the bridge. The other 5 gigahertz antenna, if you turned it into Wi-Fi mode, it worked, and so you could browse and you can get on your phone and do what you needed to do. It just wouldn't create that point-to-point bridge. Something had happened with one of the seals, and I have no clue how long the water had been in there, but it was pretty clear that the water had been in there for quite a while, potentially over a year, and it had just gotten high enough and just to the point where it finally corroded some leads, and it died. And it took me forever, because the device was talking to the network, it was kind of working, and so it was like, well, okay, it can't be this side of the bridge, it must be the other side of the bridge. And I'm like, had I just gone and checked them all or whatever, I would have found it super quick. But because I didn't want to get on the roof, and it was working enough that I could see it, I'm like, well, that one's probably not the problem. So moral of the story is, it's usually the last place you look.
So let me just say, you got submerged in data that you couldn't find.
Yeah, right.
That's definitely an unusual IT problem. So the next question, what's the most rewarding part of being an IT engineer?
I think that there's two things. Seeing the solutions that you put together actually work and work well. It's not so fun when the reverse happens, but when you finally figure out that problem that's been bugging you forever, and it's sometimes the dumbest thing you've ever heard, like the last thing, it gives you a sense of relief, and you feel like, man, I finally got that, I think the other thing, though, is the experience that my staff, my customers tell me, the good things they tell me about my staff, the IT folks that I have working on with me, the really good experiences they have with them. It makes me feel good knowing that we can have a positive impact upon our customers. And while we don't work directly with kids, it's good to know that I'm serving my staff well internally, and they're able to provide better service to our clients because of it.
That definitely makes sense. So, your favorite tech-related movie or book?
Probably going to be Hackers from the 80s. That movie, there's just something about it, especially when you know something about IT and you just kind of watch it with your hands in your face in your hands. You're like, it doesn't work like that. But back in the day with some of like the pseudo VR stuff and some of the language, it was fun.
Sure. So, what's the nerdiest piece of tech you own?
Nerdiest piece of tech? Oh man, I don't know. I own a lot of tech, but computers, video game consoles, a drone. I like technology, and so I honestly, I think it's all pretty nerdy. My kids are. I think I've been the nerdiest is probably the smart home stuff that I've purchased and configured over the last few years. So automated door locks and lights and timers and all sorts of crazy stuff, and automations in the house is the fun thing. We're getting closer and closer to the house.
Wait, so are you secretly building a Tony Stark lair by any chance? Because so much of automation.
I wish. I'm like, I've been looking for the holographic generator for Jarvis, but it's not, the tech isn't there yet. But no, it's, and it's funny because my wife, and some of the things drive her crazy, and some of the things she actually likes and doesn't realize she likes it, like our front door, automatically unlocking when she gets home, and she can carry groceries or whatever in and not have to unlock it, or just little things like that.
Impressive. So the next time we see Iron Man pop up in real life, I think we can all agree it's going to be you.
Let's hope. If I had Iron Man's money, it would be done already. I'd figure out a way.
So one IT operations management skill you wish you had mastered earlier in your career?
Oh, project management. Just and time management for the other. I definitely, especially early in my career, man, there are days I would get stuck on a problem for far too long before calling like support for something. I'm like, I've spent a day and a half trying to figure this out on my own. I'm like, okay, look, I should have called them long before, if I couldn't figure whatever it is out. And sometimes they couldn't solve it, but at least it would have been, better track. But there are times I'll get laser focused on something and not look up, and then all of a sudden the whole day's gone. And that there's a better way to do that. There's a balance of trying to solve it, but also knowing early enough that, okay, you know what, this is getting nowhere. Let's try something different. Let's reach out. Let's do whatever. And the times that I have been cognizant and have done that, I think I've had a far better experience with it. It's gotten resolved quicker, or the simple fact of talking to somebody else has given me new ideas and helped me solve the problem faster than if I'd just kind of been zeroed in on it.
So now's my last question. What's the best piece of advice you've received in your ITOM career, and what is the best piece of advice you think anyone who's starting in IT operations management should definitely listen to?
I think there's two things. One, focus on your customer and your customer experience. I think as IT people specifically, it's very easy to get bogged down with the day-to-day and the intricacies of an issue, and not really think about, okay, what's the customer experience going to be with this? And this, so it goes hand in hand with have a robust change management system. I don't care who you are. You could be a help desk person, but have a system in place so that you're not just making changes on the fly randomly, because that directly impacts the customer experience. And that includes stuff like, plan it out well ahead of time. Consider what can go wrong. What are the risks? Have a backup plan. I can't tell you how many times me not having a backup plan versus me having it, like how differently it went. And don't be afraid to back out of that plan. Use the backup plan if you need to. You can always back out, go back to the way it was, figure out what went wrong, and replan it. But there's a point of no return that if you decide just to keep pushing, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad for you. It's going to be bad for your systems, or it's going to be bad customer experience. Sometimes you can get it right in IT, but you can get it so very wrong with user experience. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's ultimately what we care about, because I'm not using most of the systems that I put in place. It's my staff that do. And so I make a mistake in that they're the ones that pay for it, not me. At least until somebody starts saying something about it, complaining, and then I'm the one that it falls on. But I want them to not have to deal with it, even if I'm having to do a little bit of extra work on the back end.
That's amazing advice. So have a rollback plan and put the customer in the spotlight. That's pretty good advice, Kyle. And I hope you enjoyed being with us today, because we definitely enjoyed having you here. We learned a lot from your experience, your strategies, your tips, and a look into how you approach technology. And that's a lot of questions. I've bugged you with a lot of questions. Do you think there's a question I've missed? So is there anything you want to add or something?
The only thing I'd add is try to enjoy your work. I know sometimes some of what we do can be tedious, and the only thing is, if you don't know how to, learn how to script, and be willing to spend a couple hours writing a script to save yourself hundreds of hours afterwards of manual work that you might have been doing. That was something I learned early in my career, and there's definitely a value proposition for spending the time doing the research and writing those things. And then it lets you get to more interesting things. Your job isn't so tedious at that point.
That's definitely true. So thanks, Kyle. It was wonderful having you here with us today. Thanks for sharing your expertise, and
Absolutely.
looking forward to learn more from you in the future.
All right. Well, thanks, Sharon. I appreciate it.